In a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia, lived a remarkable woman named Evelyn Johnson. At 72 years old, Evelyn was as vibrant and full of life as she had been in her younger days. Her small, cozy home stood proudly amidst well-manicured lawns and colorful flower beds. It wasn't grand or luxurious, but it was hers, a testament to decades of hard work and sacrifice. For over 30 years, Evelyn had been a dedicated schoolteacher, pouring her heart into educating children from underprivileged backgrounds. Even after retirement, she continued to volunteer at local schools, mentoring young teachers and helping students who needed extra guidance. Evelyn's life was simple yet fulfilling. She spent her mornings tending to her garden, where roses, daisies, and marigolds bloomed in radiant hues. Her afternoons were reserved for reading books, baking pies, and occasionally hosting neighbors for tea. Though her husband had passed away many years ago, leaving her to raise their 2 sons alone, Evelyn never let hardship dim her spirit. Her faith, resilience, and unwavering optimism carried her through even the toughest times. Now, with both sons grown and living far away, Evelyn cherished the independence that came with age. Yet deep down, she missed having family close by. On this particular sunny afternoon, Evelyn was busy pruning her rose bushes when she noticed a white van pull up outside her house. The vehicle looked official enough, with bold letters on its side reading Metro Utilities. 2 men stepped out, dressed in what appeared to be standard work uniforms, bright orange vests, hard hats, and tool belts slung around their waists. One of them approached her driveway while the other lingered near the van, adjusting some equipment. "Good afternoon, ma'am," said the taller of the 2 men, tipping his hat politely. His voice sounded friendly, though there was something about his demeanor that struck Evelyn as slightly off. Still, she smiled warmly, assuming they were there for legitimate reasons. "We're here to check for a possible gas leak," he explained. "A neighbor reported a strange smell earlier today. We'll need to take a quick look inside your house to ensure everything's safe." Evelyn hesitated for a moment. She hadn't smelled anything unusual, nor had any of her neighbors mentioned anything to her. But these men looked professional, and their story seemed plausible. Besides, Evelyn prided herself on being a good citizen, helpful and cooperative whenever someone needed assistance. So, despite a faint nagging feeling in the back of her mind, she nodded and gestured toward her front door. "Of course," she said kindly. "Please come in." As the 2 men entered her home, Evelyn couldn't shake the unease creeping over her. They moved with purpose, asking questions about the layout of the house and where the gas lines might run. One of them wandered into the kitchen, while the other headed upstairs, claiming they needed to inspect various appliances. Evelyn stayed, downstairs trying to focus on making lunch, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the strangers roaming her personal space. It wasn't long before things started to feel increasingly suspicious. The man in the kitchen opened drawers and cabinets without permission, muttering vague explanations about checking ventilation systems. Meanwhile, the one upstairs seemed to be taking an awfully long time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the 2 men reappeared, assuring Evelyn that everything was fine. "No leaks detected, ma'am," the taller man said with a grin. "You're all clear." Relieved but still uneasy, Evelyn thanked them and saw them out. As soon as the van disappeared down the street, she locked her door and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. Something about the whole encounter didn't sit right with her. Deciding to double-check her belongings just to be safe, Evelyn walked over to her bedroom closet and retrieved a small metal box hidden beneath a stack of blankets. This box contained her emergency savings, $5,000 in cash earmarked for church, donations, and a few cherished family heirlooms. Her heart sank when she opened the box and found it empty. Panic surged through her as she frantically searched the room, hoping against hope that she'd misplaced the items. But deep down, she already knew the truth. Those men weren't utility workers at all. They were thieves, cleverly disguised and expertly manipulative. And they had stolen from her. Shaken and overwhelmed, Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, tears streaming down her face. She felt violated, betrayed, and utterly powerless. After a few moments, she reached for her phone and dialed her younger son, Marcus, He was her rock, her protector, and the person she turned to whenever life became too heavy to bear. When Marcus answered, Evelyn's voice trembled as she recounted the events of the day. She hated burdening him with her problems, especially since he worked such a demanding job, but she needed his advice and his comfort. Marcus listened intently, his jaw tightening with each word. By the time Evelyn finished speaking, he was seething with anger. Not only had these criminals targeted his mother, but they had preyed on her kindness and trust. What they didn't realize, however, was that Evelyn's son wasn't just any ordinary person. Marcus was a highly decorated Delta Force commander, trained to handle situations far more dangerous than this. And now, fueled by love and a burning desire for justice, he vowed to make sure these thieves paid dearly for what they'd done. For Evelyn, the theft was more than just a loss of money and possessions. It was a violation of her sense of security. For years, she had believed her neighborhood was a safe haven, a place where people looked out for one another. Now that illusion had been shattered, but little did the thieves know, their actions had set off a chain reaction that would lead to consequences far beyond anything they could have imagined. When Marcus Johnson heard his mother's trembling voice on the other end of the phone, his heart sank. Evelyn rarely called him unless it was something important, and the tone of her voice told him everything he needed to know. As she recounted the story, how two men posing as utility workers had tricked their way into her home and stolen her savings, Marcus felt a mix of emotions: anger, guilt, and an overwhelming urge to protect her. He hated that he wasn't there when it happened, but now, sitting in his apartment thousands of miles away, he vowed to do whatever it took to make things right. Marcus wasn't your average son. At 38 years old, he had spent nearly 2 decades serving in the U.S. military, rising through the ranks to become one of the most respected members of Delta Force, an elite special operations unit known for its secrecy and precision. Nicknamed the Ghost by his comrades, Marcus was renowned for his ability to operate unnoticed, striking swiftly and decisively before disappearing without a trace. His missions often involved high-stakes scenarios, rescuing hostages, dismantling terrorist cells, or gathering intelligence behind enemy lines. But this time, the mission hit closer to home than ever before. After hanging up with Evelyn, Marcus immediately sprang into action. First, he calmed his mother down, reassuring her that everything would be okay. He promised her he'd handle the situation personally, emphasizing that she shouldn't worry about retaliation or further danger. Then he began piecing together what little information she could provide: the description of the van, the uniforms the men wore, and the fact that they claimed to be checking for a gas leak. These details might seem minor to someone else, but to Marcus they were critical clues. His next step was reaching out to a neighbor who had recently installed a Ring camera on their porch. Though Evelyn didn't own such a device herself, Marcus knew that modern technology could work wonders if used correctly. After explaining the situation and assuring the neighbor that discretion was key, Marcus gained access to the footage. Sure enough, the camera had captured the white van pulling up outside Evelyn's house. The timestamp matched the day of the robbery, and though the video quality wasn't perfect, Marcus managed to zoom in on the van's license plate. Only part of it was visible, but it was enough to get started. With the partial plate number in hand, Marcus tapped into resources only someone with his background could access. Over the years, he had built a network of trusted contacts: former colleagues, private investigators, and even tech-savvy friends who specialized in cybersecurity. Within hours, he traced the van to a rental company based in a nearby city. Posing as a concerned citizen, Marcus contacted the company under the pretense of reporting suspicious activity. The employee on the other end confirmed that the van had indeed been rented out recently, providing Marcus with the names and addresses of the individuals listed on the rental agreement: Ray Franklin and Dwayne Carter. As Marcus dug deeper, he discovered that Ray and Dwayne weren't amateurs. They were seasoned criminals with a string of burglaries to their name, all involving similar tactics: posing as utility workers, cable installers, or repairmen to gain entry into homes. Their modus operandi was clear: target elderly residents, who were less likely to question authority figures or put up resistance. What made them especially dangerous was their careful planning and attention to detail. From the fake uniforms to the fabricated stories, they left no stone unturned in ensuring their schemes appeared legitimate. But what these thieves failed to account for was the fact that their latest victim had ties to one of the most elite military units in the world. And unlike local law enforcement agencies, which often struggled with limited manpower and red tape, Marcus operated outside conventional boundaries. He had the skills, the connections, and the determination to track down every last member of their operation, and he wasn't going to stop until justice was served. Over the next few days, Marcus immersed himself in the investigation, treating it like any other mission he'd undertaken during his career. He studied maps of the area, pinpointing locations where the duo might lay low after committing crimes. He reviewed arrest records and social media profiles, searching for patterns or weaknesses in their behavior. Most importantly, he reminded himself why he was doing this, not for revenge, but to ensure that no one else would fall victim to their schemes. Evelyn, meanwhile, tried to carry on with her daily routine, though the weight of the robbery lingered heavily on her mind. She appreciated Marcus's reassurances, but couldn't help feeling guilty for letting strangers into her home so easily. "I should have known better," she lamented during one of their nightly calls. "I let my guard down." "You didn't do anything wrong, Mom," Marcus replied firmly. "These people are professionals. They prey on good-hearted folks like you. That's on them, not you." His words brought some comfort, but Evelyn still worried about what Marcus might do in response. She knew how fiercely protective he was, and while she wanted justice, she also feared the lengths he might go to achieve it. Unbeknownst to Evelyn, Marcus had already formulated a plan. Using his knowledge of surveillance techniques, he tracked Ray and Dwayne to a run-down motel on the outskirts of town. The place was a far cry from the upscale hotels Marcus was accustomed to staying in during deployments, but it fit the profile of a hideout for low-level criminals. For several nights, he staked out the location, observing their movements and learning their habits. He noted the times they came and went, the vehicles they drove, and the people they interacted with. Every scrap of information brought him closer to understanding the bigger picture. What Marcus uncovered shocked even him. Ray and Dwayne weren't working alone. They were part of a larger criminal ring led by a man named Victor Kane. According to whispers among local underworld figures, Kane specialized in orchestrating elaborate thefts and fencing stolen goods through a network of corrupt businesses. His operation spanned multiple states, making him a formidable adversary. But formidable adversaries were exactly what Marcus thrived on. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Marcus realized that catching Ray and Dwayne wouldn't be enough. To truly dismantle the operation, he needed to expose Kane and bring the entire syndicate crashing down. It was a daunting task, but Marcus had faced impossible odds before and won. With each passing day, his resolve hardened, fueled by the image of his mother's tear-streaked face and the promise he'd made to keep her safe. Though Evelyn remained blissfully unaware of the full scope of her son's efforts, she continued to lean on her faith and community for strength. She attended church services, shared her story with close friends, and found solace in the kindness of others. Still, there was a quiet determination in her eyes, a reflection of the same resilience that had carried her through life's toughest moments. If anyone could take down these criminals, she believed it was her son. And so as Marcus prepared for the next phase of his mission, the stage was set for a confrontation unlike anything Ray, Dwayne, or Victor Kane had ever encountered. Little did they know, the man hunting them wasn't just a concerned son seeking justice. He was a highly trained warrior with nothing left to lose. As Marcus Johnson delved deeper into his investigation, he began to piece together the intricate web of Victor Kane's criminal empire. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a case of two small-time thieves stealing from an elderly woman. It was part of something much larger and far more sinister. Ray and Dwayne were merely pawns in a game orchestrated by Kane, whose reputation as a ruthless crime boss preceded him. Known for his cunning and calculated approach, Kane had managed to evade law enforcement for years by operating in the shadows. But what Kane didn't know was that he was now facing someone who thrived in the shadows. Someone like Marcus. With precision honed over years of military training, Marcus mapped out every detail of his plan. He knew that rushing in blindly would only lead to failure, or worse, put innocent people at risk. Instead, he decided to play the long game, gathering intelligence and setting traps that would ultimately expose Kane's entire operation. His first move was to study Ray and Dwayne's routines meticulously. For days, he observed them from a distance, noting their habits, when they left the motel, where they went, and whom they met. He noticed how they often visited a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town, a place frequented by other shady characters. It didn't take long for Marcus to deduce that this bar served as a meeting point for members of Kane's crew. To gain access to their inner circle, Marcus needed to establish credibility without raising suspicion. Drawing on skills learned during covert missions overseas, he created a fake identity, a rogue operator looking to sell weapons seized from black market dealers. Using burner phones and encrypted messaging apps, he reached out to one of Kane's lower-level associates, claiming to have valuable merchandise too hot for regular buyers. To sweeten the deal, Marcus hinted that he could also provide insider information about rival gangs and law enforcement movements. The bait worked almost instantly. Within hours, the associate responded, asking for proof of the goods and requesting a face-to-face meeting. Marcus agreed but insisted on keeping the location neutral, a tactic designed to test whether the associate truly represented Kane or was simply trying to scam him. When the meeting took place in a deserted parking lot late at night, Marcus arrived armed with counterfeit documents and staged photos of confiscated firearms. The associate inspected the materials briefly before nodding in approval. "Victor will want to meet you," he said cryptically, handing Marcus a slip of paper with an address scribbled on it. Back at his temporary hideout, a nondescript motel room miles away from Evelyn's neighborhood, Marcus reviewed the address. It led to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city, a perfect spot for illegal dealings. Knowing that walking into such a situation unprepared could be fatal, Marcus prepared meticulously. He equipped himself with non-lethal tools, stun grenades, zip ties, and pepper spray, and ensured he had backup ready if things went south. Though he preferred working alone, Marcus understood the importance of having trusted allies nearby. He discreetly contacted 2 former Delta Force teammates who owed him favors, briefing them on the situation and instructing them to stay hidden until absolutely necessary. The night of the meeting arrived, cloaked in darkness and heavy rain. Marcus drove to the warehouse in an unmarked van, his mind sharp and focused. As he entered the building, he spotted Ray and Dwayne standing near a stack of crates, along with several other men whose faces were obscured by hoods. In the center of the group stood Victor Kane, a tall, imposing figure with cold, calculating eyes. Kane exuded authority, his presence commanding respect even among his own crew. "Who are you?" Kane asked sharply, his voice dripping with suspicion. Marcus maintained his composure, introducing himself under his alias and explaining his fabricated backstory. Kane listened intently, occasionally glancing at the counterfeit documents Marcus had provided. After what felt like an eternity, Kane nodded slowly, seemingly satisfied for now. "You've got guts showing up here," he remarked, "but I don't trust easily." Marcus smiled faintly, playing the role of a desperate yet ambitious opportunist. "Trust is earned," he replied smoothly. "Let me prove myself, and you'll see I'm worth your time." Kane smirked, clearly intrigued. "Fine. We've got a job lined up tomorrow night, a big score. If you can handle yourself, we'll talk business afterward." It was exactly the opening Marcus had hoped for. By agreeing to participate in the upcoming heist, he would gain unprecedented access to Kane's operation, while positioning himself to dismantle it from within. However, the thought of letting another crime unfold weighed heavily on him. He reminded himself that stopping these criminals required patience and strategy. Acting prematurely could ruin everything. The following evening, Marcus joined Kane's crew at a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Atlanta. The target was a wealthy businessman rumored to keep large sums of cash and valuables inside his home. While the others busied themselves breaking in and securing the premises, Marcus lingered in the background, observing their methods and identifying weaknesses in their plan. True to form, Kane's team moved efficiently, disabling alarms and bypassing security systems with practiced ease. But Marcus noticed something crucial. They weren't just stealing. They were planting evidence implicating rival gangs in the burglary. When the job was done, Marcus returned to the warehouse, where Kane eagerly awaited the spoils. This time, however, Marcus came prepared. Under the guise of delivering additional intel, he activated a hidden GPS tracker embedded in one of the stolen items, ensuring authorities could trace its movement. Then, using subtle psychological tactics, he sowed seeds of doubt among Kane's crew, hinting that someone might be leaking information to rivals. The tension in the room grew palpable, with accusations flying back and forth. By the end of the night, Kane's once unified team was fractured, their trust eroded by paranoia. Sensing an opportunity, Marcus slipped away unnoticed, leaving behind enough breadcrumbs for law enforcement to follow. Though dismantling the entire operation would require careful coordination with federal agencies, Marcus had successfully planted the groundwork for its downfall. Throughout this process, Evelyn remained blissfully unaware of her son's daring exploits. She continued her daily routine, finding solace in prayer and community support. Occasionally, she wondered aloud why local police hadn't made any progress in retrieving her stolen belongings. Each time, Marcus reassured her that justice would prevail, though he kept the specifics of his efforts vague. He didn't want her worrying about the dangers he faced or the lengths he was going to in order to protect her. For Marcus, the mission was personal, but it was also about more than just avenging his mother. It was about sending a message to criminals everywhere. No matter how clever or powerful they thought they were, there would always be someone willing to stand up against them. And in this case, that someone was a highly trained warrior fueled by love, loyalty, and an unyielding sense of duty. The storm rolled in without warning, blanketing the city in sheets of rain and howling winds. It was the kind of night where most people stayed indoors, huddled under blankets with a cup of tea or coffee to chase away the chill. But for Marcus Johnson, it was the perfect cover. The weather masked his movements, turning the world into a blur of shadows and echoes that played perfectly into his hands. His plan had been set in motion, and now it was time to execute the final phase. Earlier that evening, Marcus had received confirmation from one of his trusted contacts within federal law enforcement. They were ready to move in on Victor Kane's operation as soon as Marcus gave the signal. All he needed to do was secure concrete evidence tying Kane directly to the criminal activities and ensure that Ray, Dwayne, and the rest of the crew were apprehended before they could scatter. With precision and purpose, Marcus prepared himself, mentally and physically, for what lay ahead. His target was an old industrial park on the outskirts of Atlanta, where Kane and his associates had gathered for a major exchange. According to intercepted communications, this meeting involved not only stolen goods but also high-ranking buyers interested in purchasing illegal firearms and counterfeit currency. If Marcus could expose this deal, it would serve as undeniable proof of Kane's involvement in organized crime. More importantly, it would bring down the entire network in one fell swoop. Dressed in dark tactical gear, Marcus moved silently through the rain-soaked streets, sticking to alleys and avoiding streetlights. He carried minimal equipment, just enough to incapacitate his targets without causing permanent harm. Non-lethal tactics were second nature to him after years of training, and tonight he intended to use every ounce of that expertise. As he approached the industrial park, he spotted the familiar white van parked outside a decrepit warehouse. Inside, voices echoed faintly, muffled by the storm raging outside. Using thermal imaging goggles borrowed from a former Delta Force teammate, Marcus scanned the interior of the building. There were at least 6 individuals inside, including Ray, Dwayne, and Kane himself. They appeared to be finalizing the transaction, counting stacks of cash and inspecting crates filled with contraband. From his vantage point, Marcus noted the layout of the room: multiple exits, piles of machinery providing cover, and a single overhead light casting uneven shadows across the space. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. With careful deliberation, Marcus initiated the first step of his plan. Pulling out a small device resembling a pager, He activated a pre-programmed frequency designed to disrupt electronic devices temporarily. Within seconds, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the warehouse into darkness. Chaos erupted instantly as shouts filled the air, followed by the sound of chairs scraping against the floor and footsteps scrambling toward the exits. Marcus seized the moment, slipping inside undetected while everyone else scrambled to regain control of the situation. Inside, Marcus moved like a ghost, using the confusion to his advantage. One by one, he neutralized Kane's men, employing quick, precise strikes to render them unconscious. Ray and Dwayne were among the first to fall, caught off guard as they fumbled blindly in the dark. Marcus tied them up with zip ties, ensuring they wouldn't pose any further threat. Meanwhile, Kane remained elusive, shouting orders and trying desperately to rally his panicked crew. "Who's there?" Kane barked, his voice laced with fear and anger. "Show yourself!" Marcus stepped forward, emerging from the shadows just long enough for Kane to catch a glimpse of his face. "You messed with the wrong family," Marcus said calmly, his tone dripping with menace. Before Kane could react, Marcus tossed a stun grenade into the center of the room. A blinding flash of light illuminated the space, followed by a deafening boom that left everyone disoriented, including Kane. When the noise subsided, Marcus closed in on his prey. Kane stumbled backward, clutching her ears and squinting against the residual glare. For all his bravado, the crime boss was no match for someone of Marcus's caliber. In moments, Marcus subdued him, securing his wrists with another set of zip ties. Breathing heavily, Kane glared up at him, his expression a mix of fury and disbelief. "You think this changes anything?" Kane spat. "You're just one man. You can't stop us all." "I don't have to," Marcus replied evenly. "I just had to stop you." With Kane and his crew secured, Marcus signaled his teammates who had been waiting nearby in case backup was needed. Together, they loaded the criminals into unmarked vans and handed them over to federal agents who arrived shortly afterward. Evidence collected from the scene, including financial records, weapons, and stolen property, would later prove instrumental in dismantling Kane's entire operation. Dozens of arrests followed across multiple states, effectively crippling the criminal syndicate. Back at Evelyn's house, life continued as usual, or so she thought. Unaware of her son's heroics, she spent her days tending to her garden, volunteering at church, and occasionally calling Marcus to check on his progress. Though she missed having him close by, she took comfort in knowing he was doing everything possible to help her recover the stolen items. What she didn't realize was that Marcus had already retrieved her savings box and heirlooms, carefully returning them to their rightful place in her closet while she slept. One evening, as Evelyn sat knitting in her living room, Marcus walked in unexpectedly drenched from the rain. She looked up in surprise, then smiled warmly. "Marcus, what are you doing here? I thought you were still working." "I finished early," he replied, pulling off his jacket and hanging it near the door. "And I wanted to make sure you're okay." Evelyn studied him for a moment, noticing the fatigue etched into his features. Despite his casual demeanor, she sensed that something significant had happened. "Are you sure nothing's wrong? You seem different." Marcus hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Finally, he decided honesty was the best policy, at least partially. "Mom, those men who broke into your house, they've been arrested, along with others who were part of their group. They won't hurt anyone else ever again." Evelyn's eyes widened in shock. "What? How did you manage that?" He shrugged modestly, brushing off her astonishment. "Let's just say I called in a few favors. The important thing is that justice has been served." Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes as she reached out to hug him tightly. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for protecting me." Though Marcus accepted her gratitude graciously, he couldn't shake the weight of what he'd done. While he was proud of taking down Kane's operation, he knew violence, even justified violence, came at a cost. Still, seeing the relief and joy on his mother's face reminded him why he had chosen this path. For Evelyn, he would do anything. In the weeks that followed, news outlets buzzed with reports of the mysterious figure who had single-handedly dismantled a major criminal syndicate. Authorities refused to comment on whether a lone individual was responsible, citing confidentiality agreements and ongoing investigations. But whispers spread among local residents, speculating about the identity of the person behind the takedown. Some even dubbed him a modern-day Robin Hood, though Marcus preferred to stay anonymous. For Evelyn, the experience marked a turning point. Determined to turn her ordeal into something positive, she launched a community outreach program aimed at educating seniors about home safety and fraud prevention. Using the recovered funds from her savings box, she organized workshops, distributed informational pamphlets, and partnered with local law enforcement to raise awareness. Her efforts inspired countless others, proving that even in the face of adversity, resilience and compassion could shine through. As for Marcus, he returned to his duties with renewed focus, knowing that his work was far from over. Yet whenever he visited Evelyn, he found solace in the simple joys of spending time with her. Whether helping her prune roses in the garden or sharing stories over dinner, he cherished these moments more than ever. Because in the end, it wasn't the battles fought or the victories won that mattered most. It was the love and connection shared with the people who mattered most. And for Marcus, that person would always be his mother. The aftermath of the takedown rippled through Atlanta like a quiet storm, leaving behind whispers of awe and relief. News outlets scrambled to piece together the story of how one of the city's most notorious criminal networks had been dismantled, seemingly overnight. Federal agents were tight-lipped about the details, citing confidentiality agreements and ongoing investigations. But rumors spread quickly among residents. Stories of a mysterious figure who had infiltrated Victor Kane's operation with precision and purpose. Some called him a vigilante, others referred to him as a guardian angel. What no one realized was that this so-called savior wasn't just some faceless hero. He was Marcus Johnson, a son driven by love for his mother. For Evelyn, life slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. The stolen savings box and heirlooms were safely back in her possession, though she never asked how they'd been recovered. She trusted Marcus implicitly, knowing he would do whatever it took to protect her. Yet even as she resumed her daily routines, tending to her garden, baking pies, and volunteering at church, the experience lingered in her mind. It wasn't just the theft itself that haunted her, but the violation of her sense of security. For years, she had believed her neighborhood was a safe haven, a place where kindness reigned supreme. Now that illusion had shattered, leaving her more cautious yet determined to rebuild trust within her community. Evelyn channeled her emotions into action, using the ordeal as motivation to help others avoid similar tragedies. With the remaining funds from her savings box, she launched an initiative called Safe Haven Seniors, aimed at educating elderly residents about home safety, fraud prevention, and recognizing scams. She partnered with local police departments, hosting workshops in community centers and churches. Her message was simple but powerful. Knowledge is your best defense. Evelyn shared her own story openly, not out of bitterness, but to inspire resilience. She wanted people to know that even after being victimized, it was possible to rise above fear and take control of their lives. The program quickly gained traction, drawing attention from news stations and social media platforms. Soon, Evelyn found herself invited to speak at events across the state, sharing her wisdom with audiences ranging from seniors to young families. Despite her growing fame, she remained humble, always emphasizing the importance of community support. "We're stronger together," she often said during her talks. "When we look out for each other, criminals don't stand a chance." Marcus watched all of this unfold with quiet pride. Seeing his mother transform her pain into something positive filled him with admiration and a renewed appreciation for her strength. Though he rarely spoke about his role in bringing down Kane's operation, he occasionally attended Evelyn's workshops, blending into the background while keeping a watchful eye on her. His presence reassured her, though she sometimes teased him about being overprotective. "I'm fine, Marcus," she'd say with a laugh. "You can stop acting like my personal bodyguard." But Marcus couldn't help himself. Even after dismantling Kane's syndicate, he remained vigilant, ensuring that no remnants of the criminal network lingered in the shadows. He stayed in touch with federal agents, receiving updates on ongoing cases tied to Kane's associates. While the bulk of the operation had been neutralized, there were still loose ends to tie up, small-time players who might try to rebuild what Marcus had destroyed. He worked tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating with law enforcement and leveraging his military connections to ensure lasting justice. Despite his efforts, Marcus wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he felt immense satisfaction knowing that Kane and his crew would never harm another family. On the other hand, he grappled with the moral implications of his actions. Though he had used non-lethal tactics throughout the mission, the line between justice and vengeance sometimes blurred in his mind. Was he truly making the world safer, or was he simply perpetuating cycles of violence? These questions weighed heavily on him, especially during quiet moments when he sat alone, reflecting on everything that had transpired. It was Evelyn who ultimately helped him find clarity. One evening, as they sat together on her porch watching the sunset, she turned to him and said softly, "Marcus, I know you did what you thought was right, and I'll never stop being grateful for everything you've done for me. But remember this. True justice isn't about punishing those who hurt us. It's about protecting those we care about. Don't let anger define you. Let love guide you." Instead, her words struck a chord deep within him. For the first time in weeks, Marcus allowed himself to breathe, letting go of the guilt and self-doubt that had plagued him. Evelyn was right. His mission hadn't been about revenge. It had been about safeguarding the people he loved and ensuring that others wouldn't suffer the same fate. That realization gave him peace, allowing him to focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on the past. As months passed, both Evelyn and Marcus found new meaning in their lives. Evelyn continued expanding Safe Haven Seniors, partnering with organizations nationwide to reach even more communities. She became a beacon of hope for countless individuals, proving that age was no barrier to making a difference. Meanwhile, Marcus returned to his duties with Delta Force, carrying the lessons he'd learned back home onto the battlefield. He approached every mission with renewed purpose, striving not just to win but to leave a lasting impact, whether by mentoring younger soldiers or advocating for programs that supported veterans and their families. Their bond grew stronger than ever, forged through adversity and tempered by mutual respect. They spent weekends gardening, cooking meals together, and reminiscing about old memories. Sometimes Evelyn would ask Marcus about his work, curious about the places he'd traveled and the challenges he'd faced. Though he kept certain details vague, he enjoyed sharing stories that highlighted the camaraderie and teamwork central to his role. In turn, Evelyn regaled him with tales from her workshops, recounting moments of triumph and laughter from participants eager to learn. One particularly memorable afternoon, Evelyn hosted a special event at her church to celebrate the success of Safe Haven Seniors. Friends, neighbors, and supporters gathered in the courtyard enjoying refreshments and live music. As Evelyn stood at the podium addressing the crowd, Marcus watched from the sidelines, marveling at her poise and grace. When she finished speaking, she gestured for him to join her on stage. Reluctantly, he stepped forward, unsure why she'd summoned him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Evelyn began, her voice warm and steady, "I want to introduce someone very special to me. This man has dedicated his life to serving others, whether on distant battlefields or right here in our own backyard. Without him, none of this would have been possible. Please give a round of applause for my son, Marcus Johnson." The audience erupted into cheers, clapping enthusiastically as Marcus stood awkwardly beside Evelyn. Though he wasn't comfortable in the spotlight, he couldn't deny the swell of emotion rising in his chest. Looking out at the sea of smiling faces, he realized something profound. His actions hadn't just protected his mother. They had inspired an entire community to come together and create change. After the event, as they walked home under a starlit sky, Evelyn slipped her arm through Marcus's and leaned her head against his shoulder. "You know," she murmured, "you may think you're just one person, but you've shown me that even one person can make a difference if they're willing to fight for what's right." Marcus smiled faintly, squeezing her hand gently. "And you've taught me that fighting doesn't always mean using force. Sometimes it means standing up for what you believe in, with kindness, courage, and love. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of family and community, both Evelyn and Marcus understood that their journey wasn't just about overcoming hardship. It was about finding strength in vulnerability, hope in darkness, and unity in diversity. Together, they had proven that even in the face of evil, good could prevail, not through hatred or retaliation, but through compassion and determination. And so, as they stepped inside Evelyn's cozy home, closing the door behind them, they carried with them not just the scars of their trials, but also the promise of brighter days ahead. For no matter how challenging the road might be, they knew they could face anything, as long as they had each other.